Welcome to Managing Through Crisis, the webcast featuring faculty from Harvard Business School sharing insights for managers on how to navigate through the COVID-19 crisis. It's mid-May now. It's hard to believe we're nearly halfway through 2020. Uncertainty continues to grip governments and economies around the world. And in the absence of reliable medical information, sound direction is hard to come by. So for anyone who is in a leadership role, whose job it is to provide direction, these are challenging times. And it's not as if things were great for leaders before the crisis hit. In January, PR firm Edelman Worldwide published its 20th annual Trust Barometer, which gauges people's trust in government, business, and media. And that report showed that 66% of those surveyed do not trust leaders to address societal challenges. So with that in mind, we're fortunate to have an expert on leadership joining us today. Nancy Koehn from Harvard Business School has made a living out of studying leaders throughout history and applying those lessons to the challenges that we face today. She's the author of Forged in Crisis, The Power of Courageous Leadership in Turbulent Times. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Brian, it's a huge pleasure.
You've been out talking quite a bit about this situation. I've seen you giving talks and doing podcasts and publishing articles. So people really value what you have to say around this. And I think, we're at a point in the crisis where leadership is now got to be front and center for people. So we got a lot of questions from our audience today. They want to hear from you on some specific things. But I wanted to start maybe with just talking about this notion of leadership being forged in crisis. The title of your book.
Yeah.
Put some definition to that. What does that mean?
So, I've been studying leaders in crisis now for 20 years, from the past and the present. My book is about past leaders, but I spend a lot of time, because I'm at the Harvard Business School, with leaders today. And there's a very interesting and a very, very interesting phenomenon, sounds trivial, very interesting set of things that happen in widespread turbulence, intensifying turbulence. And you see it over and over. And the person I think who captured it best is Abraham Lincoln, talking in December of 1862 at one of the many kind of low points of the Union, and particularly the Union Army's fortunes, on which the future of the country hinged in the Civil War. And he said, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. And, he's talking about a multi-chapter crisis, not unlike the COVID crisis. And he's talking about the need to, raise the level of our collective game. Leaders raise their game, generals raise their game, ordinary Americans raise their game, politicians raise their game. And that's what happens, I have seen over and over again in crises. As you know, Brian, because we've talked about this before, I stand firmly on a mountain of evidence and now, half a lifetime of research that says that the courageous leaders, effective leaders, real leaders are made, they're not born. And there's something about the urgency and the high stakes, particularly of a longer crisis like this one, in which leaders find themselves being made at a more intense, more sustained, and more powerful and demonstrable, right, evident way. And we see that, over and over again, including in people who aren't great leaders before the crisis. They kind of come out of the mist and discover, hey, this is my moment, and they rise. They rise to the challenge. So leadership as our kind of most courageous leadership. I'm not talking about, inconsistent or, fearful leadership or, manipulative leadership. I'm talking about courageous leadership. We see lots of it all around the world. Courageous leaders get better, and they're mostly or most powerfully made in crisis.
So skeptics might say, history's in the past. We're facing something that's never happened before. I mean, it's amazing when you actually try to wrap your brain around this. We're all going through something completely unprecedented at the same time around the world. Is there any precedent that we can look at that will help us find our way through this crazy period?
I think there are a number of them. I mean, a lot of people have drawn selective, I think, but still very important, references and knowledge and perspective from other pandemics. Both, I know the one that's talked about so much in the United States is the flu in the Spanish flu in the early 20th century, 1918, 1919, but there have been other pandemics in this country and all over the world, from Ebola to SARS to, swine flu in the last 25 years that have a, great deal to do with not only the origin of this crisis, but some of the important strategies that were used to contain what is still the primary motor of the global crisis. The primary motor of the global crisis is a pandemic. It's a virus. There are a lot of other crises, some of which are becoming proportionally almost as great, like the macroeconomic crisis. But they begin and end with the pandemic. So those are important precedents. World War II is looking to me more and more like something we want to look back on. And let me say why. It's not that we're fighting visible enemies in the same way there were combatants on either aligned across two sides in the Allies and in Nazi Germany during the Second World War. But the stakes are life and death, as they are in pandemics. It's global. It's extremely global. It came on the world very fast, both in 1939 and then for America in 1941. But once it was there, once it became a global crisis, it in a sense became the driving motor of everything that happened. And people didn't talk about a new normal in 1944 or 1943. They talked about the post-war world. And I think that's another important aspect of this. We should be looking now and thinking about, we're many chapters away, but leaders are always looking to the future, facing forward, learning forward. What is the post-COVID world? Because the COVID pandemic and all the different sources of turbulence that follow on that are fed by that are recreating all kinds of things, right? And by the way, eliminating other aspects. So that's another important precedent in which, this is the last thing I'll say here to this question, in which a lot of different people, institutions, businesses, governments, leaders, ordinary citizens mobilize themselves to really achieve the right mission, which was the defeat of Nazi Germany. The important end game of this World War II that's relevant for precedents or thinking about our time is all kinds of people and institutions help solve that crisis. Ordinary citizens, governments, individuals, leaders, companies, businesses. And it was about not just ending the war, it was about rebuilding from the end of that conflict. And all those aspects of the COVID pandemic are beginning to be things that leaders should be thinking about now, even though we're at least several chapters away from the post-COVID-19 world.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of too in this crisis as it plays out are examples of people assuming the role of leader, even when that may not have been something they had done prior to the crisis.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about frontline workers, entrepreneurs, people who are coming up with innovative ways to find PPE for hospitals and things like that. I don't know if you're observing that at the same time.
Absolutely, and I'm hearing about it. I've been talking to all kinds of groups recently. I talked to NASA scientists last week. I talked to doctors. I've talked to mayors as part of the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. I just am talking to all kinds of people looking for guidance or asking questions. And they're all talking about this. People in their organizations that are stepping up real time to take leadership responsibility and seemingly back to being made, kind of learning by watching and then learning by doing as they become more of a leader, more resilient, more confident than they were even 6 weeks ago. So this is another aspect of the making of leaders that happens in crises. Young people, older people that haven't led before come out of the mists and start leading effectively.
Yeah. What are some of the characteristics that we should look for in somebody? There are leaders right now who are being forged. If we look back on this date 50 years from now, you're probably going to have lots of examples of people who stepped up. What will that look like?
I think it will look like people who found their way to, because some of this is learning by doing. Some of it's watching other good leaders. Some of it's listening to people and hearing what they need in order to stay grounded and do their work. Sometimes that work for many of us is staying inside and staying safe or following social distancing protocols. What I think we're going to see are people who access some of these tools and characteristics. They're not innate, they're learned. So one of them begins with, the constant but very consistent communication, right? Same bat time, same bat channel, fireside chats, Andrew Cuomo's 11:30 briefings, right? On a regular cadence, leaders talking to their followers, their constituents, their stakeholders, other people looking for leadership. And when they communicate, if you will, aspect number 2 or tool number 2, they're always presenting a combination of brutal honesty. Here are the challenges. Here are the constraints. Here's what we don't know. Here's what we're trying to do now. Here are the most important things we face. And here are the stakes, the challenges, and the responses to those challenges. Brutal honesty critical for trust, honesty critical for followers, jobs, and direction, right? But brutal honesty married to credible hope, right? What do we have in the way of resources? Not just tangible resources, but our people's courage, our people's resilience, our people's unity, our people's strength, our people's discipline, right? What do we have in terms of what things we can summon up to do our jobs and to weather the crisis? So that credible hope piece, which every great crisis leader understands, right, is married to, like a balance sheet, the assets go with the liabilities, brutal honesty, credible hope. I'd say a third aspect that's absolutely, again, you see it over and over again with crisis leaders, is the ability to understand that people's morale, let's call it morale, old-fashioned word, people's energy, their morale, their ability to navigate not just the practical and the tangible storms here in a pandemic, but also their ability to navigate the emotional waves and high winds that the great crisis leaders also speak to, keep their fingers on people, their followers' morale, their teams, their company, their country, their cities' morale, and they also speak to it. So you think about Winston Churchill, right? He would begin a speech, he did this in 1940, the news from France is very bad. And he would end the speech by saying, we will fight on the beaches. We will fight in the fields. We will fight in the streets. We will never surrender. What's he doing? Brutal honesty. I'm now going to minister. I'm going to speak to your morale. I'm going to call up your strongest, most resilient self. And that's the place that I'm going to help you access so we can move forward. So those three things are absolutely essential for crisis leaders to be doing. And let me say one other thing that's very important. You're going to navigate point to point. There is no GPS kind of list of moves and exits and miles that says here we are in May and here's where we'll be a year from now in August. And you just follow these directions. You've got to be comfortable as a leader with the uncertainty and the unknown and the constant volatility and with navigating to this point. And when that point, right, looks like it might not be the right one or we need to go to in a different direction, you pivot and you take your people with you and you learn as you go. So those 4 tools, essential kind of to every great crisis leader showing up.
So let's flip the script then and tell us, what does failure look like in this time? We've all experienced leaders who we kind of scratch our head and say, how did this person get to this level of responsibility? I would imagine in a time like this, if you're in over your head, it's going to be pretty apparent.
Well, yeah, that's fascinating. I'm hearing this from so many different people across the organizational world that it's like crisis, it's like makes so many things clear. The word apocalypse in Greek means revelation. And I don't mean in a biblical sense. I mean, all will be revealed. A lot's revealed, including, an individual or a team's competence as a leader or leaders. So inconsistency, right? I don't mean pivot. I don't mean, the circumstances have changed, right? We're going to be changing because we know new information. I mean inconsistency, right? I think that's a very, very, that makes people anxious. And the last thing you want to do is feed mass fear that turns to panic, right? That no matter what the circumstances are. That's not good at a collective level. So I think inconsistency is a glamour don't, a leadership don't. Not telling the truth. So people have, when the stakes are as high as they are now, life and death, people have very good Geiger counters for figuring out, or very good, filters for figuring out what rings true and what doesn't. So leaders have to tell the truth. That is really important. You can't trust someone, you can't trust someone who doesn't tell you the truth, particularly when the stakes are life and death, and you can't follow someone you don't trust. So I would say dishonesty or not telling the truth is incredibly important. And not something any good leader wants to do, no matter how difficult the truth is to offer or say or communicate. A third aspect is you need a great team of people. So if you're surrounded by an inexperienced team, or a team that doesn't seem to have the organization or the mission or the followers' best interests at heart, that quickly becomes apparent. And that team really reflects on the leader, because in a crisis, as you said, Brian, it's unprecedented. You need people that know more than you do about the aspects of this novel, widespread, right, high stakes set of circumstances. And so people also look around, at who leaders are surrounding themselves with, and think, what's going on with those people? And if you're not listening to and surrounding yourself with good people, again, people's, filters will quickly say, oh, this is worrisome. I'm not so sure I should go in this direction with this person, because they don't know how to find people that know a lot more than they do about this important situation. So all four of those are leadership don'ts in crisis. Yeah. And one last thing that I think is important, and we don't usually talk about it in kind of the Harvard Business School bullet points that we are very good at distilling things down to. The last thing you want is some empathy, right? Thoughtful, demonstrable, calculated empathy towards not only those that have suffered and lost, but towards those who are in danger or more vulnerable. It's so important for people to trust you and understand that you're really looking out for them, not just their heads and their wallets, but their hearts and their emotions.
So we've talked a lot about people observing leadership and what that looks like to people, but talk to the leaders now. Like if I'm in a leadership role and I'm starting, I don't know what's going to happen either. I'm facing uncertainty in my own mind, and I've got to now sustain this and sustain, my organization's ability to operate in the midst of this uncertainty. What are some things leaders can do to help them succeed?
Well, the first thing I would say is probably best summed up by all of our experience, which most of us haven't had in some time now, of getting on an aircraft and the announcements coming on before you take off, when the flight attendant says, and should the cabin pressure drop, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Please put your oxygen mask on first before you secure someone that you're sitting next to. So that's the lead in to job number one for all these people with now all this weight and responsibility on their shoulders, most of which was unexpected and very little of which we kind of proactively planned for, is to take good care of yourself, right? You got to feed and water yourself well. You got to sleep enough. You have to have some time every day free from your device, because you got to have a time to just kind of ground yourself and let your mind wander. I'm a great believer in the walk as a mind clearing activity. Steve Jobs did it, Charles Darwin did it, Lincoln did it, Ernest Shackleton did it. Lots of great leaders help kind of gather their thoughts and find their resilience and courage muscles by walking and taking a moment out from the fray. So taking good care of yourself, including recovering, whatever that means, standing on your driveway watching your daughter on her tricycle, right? Playing the piano, singing at the top of your lungs in the shower, whatever it is that momentarily takes you away from the pressures and the unremitting demands on you, is helping your organization and your people in all kinds of ways. So first thing I would say is take good care of yourself. Second thing I would say is, activate those people in your briefcase of experiences and connections. Often those are people that, maybe fellow CEOs or fellow leaders or fellow managers that you were, you knew some time ago, but that now suddenly you realize have some relevant information or experience, often across national boundaries, that you can reach out to. Every great crisis leader I've ever studied does this. They like kind of reach back and think, from Kennedy, John Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, reaching out to Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister of Britain, even though they didn't have an intense relationship and discovering they had a lot to say to each other, to, folks today reaching out across, years of being apart and saying, I remember when we were dealing with this issue at a pharmaceutical conference in 2012, I'm going to get back to that person. So reaching back, opening up your mind and saying, who could be helpful here, not only practically or strategically or tactically or materially, but who could help me sort out, how I can stay my best most of the day. So that is important. And the third thing I'd say is Zoom and all our dependence now on this, really pretty impressive, but still fallible technology is kind of wringing a lot of the humanity out of in-person meetings or even phone calls. Zoom doesn't really lend itself to, hey, I remember your daughter was, applying to college. So it's kind of, conversation we have around the Keurig machine, right? Or the kind of kvetching we do before the meeting starts, because most meetings are late, and we're, nudging each other and say, hey, how about them Red Sox? So I would also say, thirdly, not only for your people, your team, the people that are underneath those folks, and your customers and your other constituents, but for yourself, just a phone call, reaching out saying, hey, I heard your mother was ill. How's she doing? Or, hey, I just wanted to check. I just want to say hi. We haven't had a chance to talk, around the coffee pot. That is very sustaining, and it creates, or it reinforces the unspoken glue that's among all of us that we haven't yet figured out how to import to Zoom. So those three things I think are very good places to start for leaders themselves.
Yeah, those are great insights. If you've got time for one more question,
yeah.
And then we'll let you go. So for people who aren't yet leaders, but who want to become leaders, these are sort of emerging leaders, right? Yeah. What should they be doing now? Is there something that they can do to take advantage of this in an opportunistic kind of way?
Yeah, I'd say first, pick out someone. Doesn't have to be someone in your company, but it's probably, that's even better if it is someone that you're, working with or can see, acting on a regular basis. But it could certainly be a national leader. Pick someone you think is doing a really good job, and then start watching them. I recommend everyone keep a leadership ledger. I call a little notebook where you handwrite, because you think better when you're not typing. You're more creative, more expansive, more integrated. That you're taking notes. Notice how he's doing that, or notice what she's doing there. I'm personally doing this with Andrew Cuomo because I'm so impressed with what he's doing. This is not someone who. We just never had no idea. 8 months ago, no one was saying, hey, Andrew Cuomo is going to be our next pandemic, courageous leader. And there's many others. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand is worth watching her YouTubes right now, watching her on YouTube. But I'm taking little notes on what he's doing because I'm learning as a scholar, kind of watching the making of a leader. So that is gold. And then start trying some of that, right? And you're learning by doing, but choose some people to learn from, and then start experimenting with things that your good intelligence and your keen emotional discernment pick out from what they're doing, and then start applying them. They have so much power right now. Remember that in a crisis, everything is intensified. Our feelings are intensified, our pores are larger, our ears are bigger. We're just taking things in at a deeper, quicker, but deeper, more meaningful level. So your ability to do that with leaders you respect and think are doing a good job, and then to experiment with that with people that and are looking to you, or people that might be looking to you, I guarantee you're going to have impact, and you're going to learn a lot, both from the teaching that you're taking in on your terms and from how people respond to you. That's incredibly valuable. And the world needs you. So that is really, truly a win-win.
Nancy, that's great advice. Always love talking to you about this stuff, but we could go on, but I have to let you go. Thanks so much for joining us.
Again, a real privilege and a pleasure, Brian.